following accounts are based on true events, with names and identifying details altered to protect those involved. These narratives contain disturbing content. Reader discretion is advised. A narrow escape. In the early 1000s, 990s, I was a reckless teenager with no regard for others. My friends and I were cruel, hurting animals, stealing, and bullying without remorse. Discipline never stuck, and my parents often just wanted me out of the house. One night, a friend showed me his father's handgun, recently acquired off the streets. The moment I held it, an idea seized me. We should rob someone. We targeted an elderly woman living alone, forcing our way into her home. My friend fled, but I pressed on, intoxicated by the power of the weapon. I found her asleep, pointed the gun at her head, and heard a voice urging me to pull the trigger. My finger tightened, but the safety was on. The realization of what I'd nearly done hit me like a sledgehammer. When I turned to leave, I saw her terrified eyes locked onto mine. Shaken, I returned home, confessed to my parents, and faced consequences that ultimately saved me from a darker path, a chance for redemption. In the late 90s, I was deep into addiction, stealing cars to fund my habit. Night, I took a van without checking the back. Only after driving to a remote desert spot did I discover 4 terrified children bound inside, victims of kidnapping. Panicked, I knew my usual buyer would either kill them or me. Instead, I freed them, brought them to safety, and anonymously alerted the police before fleeing the state. Getting clean was the hardest thing I've ever done, but those kids gave me a reason to change. Years later, hearing they'd been reunited with their families was the only closure I needed. Surviving the unthinkable. Growing up in a dangerous Baltimore neighborhood, violence was routine. Drug dealers ruled our building, and gunfire was background noise. One afternoon, I came home to armed men in our apartment. They forced my grandmother and me into a room before a shootout erupted outside. When silence fell, the men were dead, and a masked figure spared us with a glance. We left everything behind that day, grateful just to be alive. The building was later razed, fitting since it had always felt like a tomb waiting to claim us. The Watcher in the Woods. During a solo backpacking trip in the Canadian wilderness, I stumbled upon an abandoned farmhouse. Curiosity led me inside, but I soon sensed someone watching. An old man with a gray beard lurking at the tree line. Ignoring my unease, I barricaded myself in the attic that night. When footsteps climbed the stairs and the doorknob rattled, I fired warning shots, roughed the door. Yet when I opened it, no one was there. At dawn, I saw the man again, staring from the attic window. I never went back alone, but the bullet holes in that door remain a chilling reminder. Some things in the wild aren't meant to be understood. These stories are warnings of how close we can come to ruin, how quickly life tests us, and why, even in solitude, we're never truly alone. The wrong kind of help. A few years ago, I worked nights at a rundown gas station off a lonely highway, the kind of place where the flickering neon sign attracts more moths than customers. One evening, a disheveled man stumbled in, his clothes torn and his eyes wild. He begged me to call the police, claiming someone was chasing him. I hesitated. Strange things happened out here, and getting involved never ended well. But the terror in his voice was real, so I dialed 911. Before the call connected, headlights swept across the parking lot. A black SUV rolled to a stop, and 2 men in suits stepped out. They moved with unsettling precision, like they'd done this before. The man beside me whimpered, backing into the snack aisle. The suits walked in like they owned the place, nodding at me before grabbing the guy by his arms. One flashed a badge, too quickly to read, and said, "We'll take it from here." Something felt off. I'd seen enough movies to know badges could be faked. But before I could react, they dragged him out. The last thing I heard was his scream. as the SUV door slammed shut. The police arrived 20 minutes later to an empty station. They took my statement, but seemed uninterested. A week later, I quit. I still wonder who that man was and whether I handed him over to the wrong people. The thing in the basement. When I was a kid, my family moved into an old farmhouse with a cellar that always stayed locked. My parents said it was unstable, but I swore I heard scratching at night. One afternoon, while they were out, I picked the rusted lock. The stairs groaned under my weight as I descended into the damp darkness. My flashlight beam caught something in the corner. A figure crouched low, its skin gray and peeling. It didn't move, but its head tilted just slightly, like it was listening. I bolted back upstairs, slamming the door behind me. When my parents got home, I told them. Instead of panicking, my dad sighed and grabbed his toolbox. He reinforced the lock without a word. That night, the scratching stopped. Years later, after my parents passed, I sold the house. The new owners asked about the cellar. I handed them the keys and left before they could open it. Some doors are better left shut. The last broadcast. In college, I hosted a late-night radio show at the campus station. Most nights it was just me, playing obscure vinyl for insomniacs. But one evening, a call came in. No ID. Just heavy breathing. Then a voice whispered, "You're next." I laughed it off until the studio lights flickered. The next caller said the same thing, and the next. By midnight, every call was a variation of that phrase. I shut it down early and rushed home. The next morning, the station manager found the equipment unplugged, the records scattered. No one had been there after me. I quit the show that day. Months later, I heard the new host vanished mid-broadcast. The mic was still on when the police arrived. Just static and something scratching against the pop filter. Final thoughts. Life has a way of showing us darkness. Sometimes in the choices we almost make, sometimes in the shadows we can't explain. These moments stay with us, reminders that the world is stranger and more dangerous than we pretend. The only lesson? Trust your gut. Walk away. And if you hear something in the dark, for God's sake, don't answer. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. I used to drive long-haul truck routes through the Midwest. One freezing December night, just outside a ghost town in Nebraska, I saw a girl standing by the roadside. No coat, just a thin dress, her hair whipping in the wind. I pulled over, against my better judgment. She climbed in silently, her skin ice cold. When I asked where she was headed, she pointed ahead and said, "Just keep driving." I cranked the heat, but she kept shivering. After 20 minutes, I glanced over to offer my jacket, but the seat was empty. The doors were still locked. At the next truck stop, I mentioned it to a waitress. She went pale and slid me a newspaper clipping from 1972. A local girl had frozen to death on that stretch of road after her car broke down. They found her 3 days later, still reaching toward the highway, the reflection that watched back. My apartment had one of those old tarnished mirrors, the kind that makes everything look slightly wrong. I started noticing my reflection would linger a second too long after I turned away. Then one night, half asleep, I saw it raise a hand while mine stayed at my side. I threw a blanket over it the next morning. That evening, the blanket was neatly folded on the couch. The mirror was clear as new glass, and in its surface, something stood behind me where nothing should have been. I smashed it with a chair. The landlord kept my security deposit, but I didn't care. Last week, my new mirror arrived. I haven't taken it out of the box. The game that played itself. At a garage sale, I bought an antique board game, hand-carved pieces, symbols I didn't recognize. The seller warned me not to play it alone. Naturally, I tried that night. I rolled the dice. They landed on a symbol that wasn't printed on them. One of the pieces moved by itself. Then my front door creaked open. I threw the game in the fireplace. it wouldn't burn. Now it sits in my closet, and sometimes I hear the dice rattling inside the box. I've started dreaming about the symbols. Last night I woke up with one carved into my bedroom wall, a final warning. I don't know why these things happen, why some people brush against the uncanny while others live untouched. Maybe we're magnets for what we fear. Maybe the darkness tastes our curiosity and follows it home. But here's what I've learned. Roads empty at night aren't really empty. Reflections need blinkers too. Games have rules we aren't meant to understand. And the most important, when something whispers, "Play with me," you run. Not toward the mystery, toward the nearest lit window where living people laugh. The alternative is becoming someone else's ghost story. The house that breathed. When my uncle died, he left me his cabin in the Oregon woods. The first night there, I woke to the sound of slow, wheezing breaths, like the walls themselves were inhaling. I told myself it was the wind, and the floorboard started rising and falling in rhythm. I fled at dawn. The realtor later said the place had been demolished years before my uncle's death. When I checked his will again, the address didn't exist on any map. Sometimes I still hear that labored breathing in my dreams. The doctor says it's sleep apnea. I know better. The wrong passenger. As a rideshare driver, I've picked up my share of odd customers. But the woman in the wedding dress was different. She got in silently, her veil hiding her face. The app showed no active ride. When we reached the cemetery, she handed me a rotting $20.00 bill and whispered, "He stood me up again." Then she was gone. The bill turned to ash in my hand. At home, I found damp footprints leading from my car to the front door. They stopped at the threshold, like something was still standing there. The library book that shouldn't exist, I found it in the returns bin. How to Survive What Comes Next by L.M.V. The checkout card showed one name over and over, mine in handwriting I didn't recognize. Hun. The text changed each time I opened it. First, survival tips, then warnings, then just my address repeated for 200 pages. When I tried to return it, the librarian said they'd never carried that title. It's on my shelf now. Sometimes it whispers. Last Tuesday, every page was blank except the last one. You're almost ready. The last message. These aren't just stories, they're warnings carved into the dark. The world is thinner than we think. Doors open by themselves. Reflections blink, and some games play you. If you've read this far, check your locks. That sound behind you? It's not the house settling. It's the dark getting comfortable. The night shift at Willowbrook. I took a security job at the abandoned Willowbrook Hospital last fall. The pay was too good to pass up. You walk the halls, log any disturbances, and try not to think about why a decaying asylum needed overnight guards. On my third night, the elevator started running by itself. Floor to floor, door sliding open to reveal empty shafts. When I radioed my partner, static hissed back. They're waking up. I found him in the West Wing, staring at padded cell, 317. The door was moving. Something inside was scratching the tiny observation window from the other side. We quit the next morning. The security company folded a week later. Last I heard, they still can't rent out that building. Something about the night shift never leaving the backseat passenger. I started driving for a rideshare app after my divorce. Easy money, or so I thought. My third pickup was a woman in a soaked blue dress. She didn't speak, just pointed north toward the river. The app showed no passenger. When I glanced back, her face was pressed against the glass, watching the water. At the bridge, she vanished. My back seat was drenched. The police later told me a woman in a blue dress had jumped from that bridge every October for 20 years. I still drive nights. Sometimes the app pings with a request from Blatters54. I cancel immediately. The game of 7 doors. My little brother found the rules scribbled in our attic. 1. Light 7 candles. 2. Knock on 7 doors. 3. The 8th door opens itself. We laughed until we tried it. The first 6 doors were fine. At the 7th, something knocked back. Now, there's an 8th door in our hallway. There wasn't there before. It's always locked. But sometimes something turns the knob from the other side. Final transmission. I'm writing this from a motel outside Flagstaff. The static on the TV won't stop whispering coordinates. There's a face in the bathroom mirror that isn't mine. They're coming. If you're reading this, check your windows. Count the shadows in your room. And whatever you do, don't answer when something knocks the 7th time. The world is full of doors that should stay closed. Some of them are opening right now. In your house. Behind you. Turn around slowly. The last tenant. When I moved into my new apartment, the super warned me about the previous resident. Guy kept complaining about footsteps in his walls, he said, rolling his eyes. We found him curled up in the bathtub one morning, scratching at the tiles with bloody fingers. The first night, I heard it too, a slow shuffling gait moving through the drywall. Now I sleep with the lights on. This morning I found a message scratched into my bedroom door. You're warmer than he was. The midnight radio. I collect vintage electronics. Last month I restored a 1947 Philco, beautiful walnut cabinet, tubes that glow like fireflies, but it only picks up one station. Every night at 3:17, Ayung, a children's choir sings London Bridge in P, perfect harmony. Then a man whispers, coordinates, always, locations where human remains were later found. The police took the radio yesterday. This morning, it was back on my workbench, still warm. The dial stuck on that. Frequency now, the wrong reflection. My bathroom mirror has developed a delay. When I turn away, my reflection lingers for just a second too long. Last night I caught it smiling after I'd stopped. This morning there were fingerprints on the glass, from the inside. Final warning. They told me I was paranoid, that grief makes people see things. That no one was watching me through the cracks in my walls. Then why do the floorboards creak in empty rooms? Why do my locked windows show up open? Why does my breath fog the mirror when I'm not speaking? I'm leaving this note because I won't be here tomorrow. Listen carefully. The dark isn't empty. Your house makes sounds when you're alone for a reason. And that thing pretending to be your reflection, it's learning. Found scribbled on a motel notepad. Room 214. The door was locked from the inside. The mirror was shattered. No body was ever found. The last page. These stories aren't just words on a screen. They're echoes in the dark. Reminders that the world is stranger than we dare admit. Pay attention to the silence between your footsteps. Notice when your reflection blinks without you. That chill down your spine? It's not just the wind. Sleep well tonight, but leave the light on.